Let me welcome everyone on behalf of IF and ITMF, Matthias Crete and myself, as well as our cooperation partner, Mathieu from the International Trade Center, and of course, on behalf of all the speakers, take the time to be with us. I tried to mute some of the people, of course. Some housekeeping rules, please mute yourself. I try to do that also if you don't do it yourself. It is a very interactive webinar that we want to have today. That's why we organize it in a Zoom meeting, not in a Zoom webinar format, which means that you are really welcome to ask questions either by just unmuting yourself or by using the function, the reaction function with a rising hand, or just using the chat box that you see on the bottom. The SCI-Side-Session today is the second one after last year's, which was the first one that for the first time that we have done the side session at the OECD, or in conjunction with the OECD Forum on due diligence in the footwear and garment sector. The objective of the SCI is to increase awareness about standard fatigue. There's a lot of awareness about audit fatigue, and they are of course interconnected to a certain extent, but standard fatigue is something that is not looked at as much and has not given the attention as much as audit fatigue, which is logic as such, because audit fatigue was and is still a challenge and a bigger one for the manufacturing industry. Nevertheless, even if there is success on the audit front, standard fatigue is not automatically resolved. You can see on the SCI website, the objectives of SCI is to increase awareness of standard fatigue, and also to provide some hints how this can be reduced. We're going to hear today about that from different speakers. And with that, I would like to share my screen and share with you the agenda of today's meeting. We are going to have first an introduction by myself. After that, Mathieu Lamol from the ITC will give an update on standard convergence. Last year, we presented for the first time a study whether and to what extent there is convergence in standard efforts to harmonize or to converge. We have created, with the help of the standards map, a tool that helps us to see whether standards, both third-party standards and or brand standards, are working towards convergence. And this year, for the second time, Mathieu will present the results, whether there has been some progress or some changes since last year. After that, Holly Menezes from SLCP will talk about driving audit convergence and will give an update from the SLCP. We regard audit fatigue as a very important topic that is interlinked with standard fatigue, and which is something that we also should keep an eye on. ITMF and IF are both big supporters of SLCP, and we're very glad that they have received so much attention and have made so much progress in the last few years. After that, we're going to hear a manufacturer talk about both audit and standard fatigue, Ms. Anne Sutanto from Pan Brothers in Indonesia. After that, we have an example how convergence can happen on the standard side. We have speakers both from Oekotex and REP, Ms. Caroline Franica and Mr. Gerwin Lepnik, who show how they are working together to reduce standard fatigue. And then my friend and colleague Matthias Kreti from the IF will give an overview of the objectives, the aspirational objectives of the SCI for 2023. With that introduction, it's my pleasure to welcome Mathieu, if he can hear me and if he is ready.
Yes, Christian, good morning. Can you hear me?
We can hear you. Great, Mathieu. The floor is all yours. You can share your slides. I don't have them, I think. And
actually, I do have this technical issue with my computer, so I've sent you the slides, and I was wondering if you would be able to share them.
Absolutely. Let me just open them quickly. If you have just sent them. Yes, here they are. So bear with me. I think that's the one, huh? Mathieu?
Yes, this is the one. Thank you so much. So maybe if you bring them screen. I will start by, again, also thanking you, Christian, Matthias, for inviting me to this important session and for the work that we've been able to do together on this SCI. The purpose of today's presentation is to give an update of the analysis that we were able to perform on basis of the standards map database, looking at standards convergence and their level of readiness to do so, with some progress that have been noticed in the last year since we presented last time. So if you go to the next slide, there is this brief introduction about what's the content of this presentation. So the background, just to make sure everyone is again up to speed when it comes to the key principles and criterions of the SCI, the background on the ITC standards map, and then the analysis that we were when looking at the particular principles and criteria for standards to converge or to be at least ready to do so. With some results, and I wanted to also bring them together side by side with what we have noticed and reviewed last year. So when we presented it in February 2022, there was already some kind of prospects for alignment. There is a little bit more even this year, and that's the good news, but I'll come to that and then conclude with a few remarks and a few proposed next steps as well to ensure that the industry is really moving into a more efficient and a more a way that benefits not only the big brands but also the manufacturers and the standards owners in the end. So first slide goes with the introduction and the background. So what is the SCI? You can go the next, Christian, if you don't mind. So as you were just saying very briefly, so this is really an initiative of the IAF and the ITMF, and the idea is really to ensure that there is some kind of guidelines and some process to help standards to reduce this fatigue of different frameworks and to identify where standards can work together and actually be more efficient. And that can then translate into reducing some compliance costs and also freeing some resources to do the actual things that the standards aim for. The next slide will even share a little bit more detail, the different principles of the SCI. So the idea is that there are 4 dimensions developed by the SCI, 4 big principles that can be translated into a set of indicators through which the standards would be likely and more or less ready to converge and to work together. And the idea here of the analysis with ITC is to look for each of those 4 dimensions, whether ITC does have the data to substantiate some kind of claims that yes, the standards would be ready to do so and to work together. So this is very much where the SCI starts from. So it's very much offering this framework of analysis and reviews of standards on how they are developed, what they are focusing on, how they are performing verification and assurance processes, and where does that lead in actually linking and establishing bridges between the systems. The next slide is just a little bit of background on the ITC standards map. So you can open this one as well. So this is a free resource of the ITC where I am working from. So this is the ITC United Nations agency focusing on trade, market access, and providing transparency on standards. There is no value judgment. It's a standards mapping looking only at certain sectors and standards that would be applying in respect to the particular searches. And the next slide shows just how this is organizing the information. So you would have for every selected standard, you can take M40 BSCI, you can take RAP, you could take any interesting scheme, and then look at the focus of their requirements from an environmental perspective, a social perspective, work and labor rights, and then also from the processes side, looking at how they actually do perform in this context. The next slide is even more detailed when it looks at the granularity of the information contained in the standards map. So you do have a number of criterions coverage where we look at different parameters to see if a standard really covers, let's say in this example, on working conditions or a policy defining the workers' rights, to which extent the standards are looking at it as an immediate mandatory requirement, if this is a major must, or if this is more of a minor when it comes to the auditing, if the issues are very explicitly covered or not, and then even looking at the text from the standards owners themselves with additional information on where to find such information. So the database, really the backend from ITC's perspective, is a pool of 1,600 data points that can then be organized to perform different types of analysis. Not only does it look at the requirements, what is covered by the standards, but also how they perform. And this is the next slide where you look at the operational requirements of the standards. So looking at how the standards are being managed, how transparent they are, how credible vis-a-vis the processes and the access to information to different stakeholders, etc. And this is very important for SCI because when we look at standards convergence, the idea is not just to look at are the standards more or less covering the same topics, workers' rights, labor, freedom of association, all these topics, but also do they operate in a manner that can actually create some trust between them to share information and to work together. And these are the operational requirements, looking very much on the independence of management, how does it work with the stakeholders, which are the members, how the controls are being organized, and the verification systems are being orchestrated by the standards. Now, I'll stop here on the standards map, and you can move to the next slides, which is very much highlighting again, how does that all connect with the SCI and the standards convergence. So here you've got indeed the four main, I said, dimensions and principles of the SCI. Number one is very much looking at how the standards are ready to harmonize. And this is a number of criterions that you can see here on the screen, on the top of the screen. So being ready to harmonize means you share some criterions, you recognize or accredit different types of systems. And this is where standards would be therefore assessed as being likely to harmonize whenever they are already engaging in some of those processes of recognitions, looking at international norms, best practices, equality, and accessibility. The second principle is about being ready to align with international frameworks, such as those of the OECD, the ILO, the UN Guiding Principles, etc. So here you have very much an assessment of the coverage of the standards. Do they really cover more or less the same language? Do they cover the same topics? Do they actually try to achieve the same results? And then the third principle is more of a level of a preparedness of the standards to share audits. And sharing audits is, of course, a very sensitive topic here. So the question is to look at the standards as of, are they ready to recognize or accept other systems? Do they have an IT sharing platform that would be ready to look either from a benchmarking perspective or compatibility system perspective to look at how the standards results and the audits could be then consumed from one system to another? And again, here it is just are the standards ready to do that or not? And the last but not least principle, number 4, is about looking at assurance of the oversight, because standards convergence can only happen if there is the same level of quality between the standards being implemented. So the audit reports and the processes that go with the process of validating information needs to be as aligned as possible with a high level of quality, because otherwise standards would never be ready to converge if they don't trust that the same quality would be in other systems. So this is the framework, principle 1, 2, 3, and 4. And now we look at those in detail for a number of standards using data we have in the 1,600 data points of standards map. So the next slides, Christian, will actually show the preliminary findings that were presented last year. So here we looked at a set of 6 standards. And again, here there is nothing new from what was presented last year. So we looked at M40, FLA, GOTS, Made in Green, SA-1000, and RAP. And we looked for each of those principles, the level of preparedness for those standards to be either ready to harmonize and to actually look and embrace everything that could be there in the OECD due diligence guidance, the ILO, the preparedness for sharing audits, and the integration of quality insurance oversight. So basically, they have all this information ready, shareable or not. Some of the standards were quite high in terms of their level of readiness. Again, that is only an indication that they would be probably ready to do so. That doesn't mean they are doing it. It's just that the level of readiness in terms of their systems and the openness of sharing information would be more or less there. When you look at the M40, for instance, the numbers are quite high. When you look at SA-1000 as well, the numbers are not so bad. It's not like either if a standard would have lower results, if you take like FLA, that it is a bad indication. No, it is only mentioning or indicating that there is a potential here for improving a little bit the readiness to working together with other systems. Now, we've looked again at the same standards plus a few more and looked if the data would show any change or any new things this year. And yes, you can actually show the slide. So it's a little bit smaller because I have more standards on this screen. And here it is interesting to see that some actually, there is no standard that has gone lower in terms of the numbers and the percentages in the assessment. There is someone who's speaking. Can you please mute? Thank you. And so basically here, the numbers are showing a general increase in the likelihood to collaborate and to work together, to harmonize and to share audits among themselves and to converge in the alignment of their indicators. This is a general trend. In some areas, not much has changed, but this is because probably the numbers were already quite high last year. So a reflection here is that generally speaking, in the course of the last year, and what has happened is that ITC has updated information in the database based on reviews of the standards and collaborations with them. But generally speaking, there has been an improvement of the readiness of converging. Have the standards really converged and worked together? This is another question, again, that is not assessed in this analysis. I want to highlight that again, that this analysis is very much about looking at the potential of standards to converge and to work together. And in this sense, even when we look at additional schemes such as the ICS, Fair Wear, Textile Exchange, there is this kind of situation here that opens up very much a number of doors for potential collaborations, exchanges, and dialogues between the standards being more and more ready to converge. I'm going to conclude here with a few conclusions and remarks. So the next slide is showing basically what we can take from these analysis, and especially now that we have some background and looking at 2022 versus 2023. We can see that basically there is a number of areas where the standards can still improve or can be more ready. But generally speaking, there has been this improvement across the board. And there are a number of indicators that if you dig into the details behind those numbers and percentages, where the standards can learn. They can learn where there are still areas of potential improvement. Now, not to say that the 100% is the target. A standard does not need to be 100% ready to converge. The question is, do they want to engage in that process or not? But generally speaking, there has been this propensity of standards to have systems and to reinforce their systems that are now, let's say, even more aligned than they were in the past. A number of next steps can then be identified, and this is the last slide I will show, the next one. A number of next steps is basically taking stock of this analysis and also of this fantastic session of this morning to really ensure that there is even more feedback gathered from the different stakeholders on the need for standards to converge and the process. And the process is very much in your hands, Christian and Matthijs, with this potential to facilitate dialogue and feedback loops between the standards owners and the schemes so that they are encouraged to build on their good efforts and actually go the extra mile of maybe working together, sharing some practices, and making the whole system even more efficient. We can certainly trust that there is a level of preparedness that is more and more consolidated in the sector, and that only more dialogue and collaborations can help in this regard. So this is my last slide. I mean, the next one is just a kind of a thank you with my email address for those who would have questions or feedback. But I will give you back the floor, and maybe we can have a few questions in the end. I know we have other brilliant speakers, and I'm looking forward to the conversation today. Thanks again, Christian, for sharing the slides, and apologies for my technical issue here. Thank you.
No worries, Mathieu. Thank you very much for sharing these really interesting and encouraging results. This is really good news. But without further ado, I will continue with the program. We are running a little late and would like now to invite Holly to share her slides with us. Please, Holly, go ahead.
Thanks, Christian. Can you see my slides?
Yes,
okay?
you can.
Yeah, fantastic. So yeah, hi everybody. I'm Holly from the Social and Labour Convergence Programme. A big thank you to Christian and to Matthijs for inviting us to present on today's session. SLCP was very excited when ITMF and IAF created the Standards Convergence Initiative a couple of years ago, because from our perspective, it's great to see manufacturers mobilizing to let the industry know of the impact that the proliferation of audits and standards is having on suppliers, and to make suggestions of how the situation could be improved. So we really support this initiative, and SLCP is particularly aligned with, I guess, the first pillar of SCI, which is around reducing audit fatigue. This is very much in line with the vision and mission of SLCP. I can see from the names on the call today that many of you are already aware of SLCP, so I won't do too much of an introduction, but just to remind you that we are a multi-stakeholder initiative working to reduce audit fatigue through the implementation of a converged assessment framework. So I'm here today just to give you a quick update on how we're doing in that regard, and to give you our latest progress. So just to recap quickly on who we are multi-stakeholder. So our tool has been designed and our program has been designed by the 270 odd signatories that we have signed up. It's a very diverse set of stakeholders, mainly from the apparel and footwear sector. It doesn't mean that just these stakeholders are using the tool. The tool can be widely used across the industry, but these are the key players in deciding how the tool operates and how the program works. And then just a very quick reminder of our theory of change. We are implementing our tool called the Converged Assessment Framework, and we believe that by doing so, we can reduce duplication of audits and improve the quality at the same time, and that this can unlock resources that can then be redeployed towards more useful activity. We all know that audits alone don't actually create change. So we want to shift all of the resources currently spent on auditing to everything that else we need to do after the audit to improve conditions. We also think that having a converged tool can bring big benefits in terms of comparability of results, data that can actually be compared to help over time and perhaps between different factories to help us better measure and understand working conditions and root causes of issues with working conditions, and that this can help us to really target the improvement activities that will have the most impact. So on to some progress updates from us. We launched our tool in 2019. And we have been scaling quite rapidly since then. So we just this morning, I heard that we had our 10,000th factory registered on the SLCP gateway that the ITC built and operate for us. So that's how many facilities are engaging with our program. We've launched the tool, the Convergence Assessment Framework, in over 55 countries and regions. And we have nearly 70 approved verifier bodies and over 700 individual verifiers who can verify the data that the factories collect. Our tool is a factory level social and labour assessment. It starts with a self-assessment by the factory, but there's also always a verification because we believe you need that step to have the high quality data. So in terms of numbers, in 2022, we had over 7,000 factories that used our tool. The year before, it had been just over 4,000. The year before that, 1,500. So you see, year on year, we're scaling quite rapidly. And this year, we aim to have 11,000 factories using our tool. We also are seeing a growing number of brands and retailers agreeing to accept the data from an SLCP assessment instead of running their own proprietary audit. So this is really good progress. This is what we want to see in terms of reducing that audit burden on suppliers. This is by no means an exhaustive list because we don't know of all the companies using SLCP. But when we hear that a brand is using the tool, we encourage them to sign up to this list on our website. They can also give details of whether they accept in only tier 1 or tier 2 and which countries they accept from. And in 2022, we saw this list grow from 50 to 65 brands and retailers. So that's really good to see, and we aim to grow it again this year. We also see some progress and steps towards convergence across the industry. So one key example is the Sustainable Apparel Coalition and the HIG platform. They have fully integrated SLCP's Convergence Assessment Framework into their social tool. So instead of creating their own proprietary social audit, they said, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to adopt SLCP's tool. So that's one good example of alignment because the HIG platform is very well used within the apparel and footwear sector. I also wanted to mention our collaboration with the ILO Better Work. They have helped us, they've co-led with us the development of step 1 of our tool. And this has led to the ability for us to have a compatibility between some of our assessments. So factories enrolled in the Better Work program in Indonesia, Vietnam, Bangladesh, and Pakistan, if they do a Better Work assessment, it's compatible with SLCP and they can share it to our gateway. And we're just about to launch that in Cambodia as well. So that's another really good example of some of the progress we're making. We're also talking to a range of different standard holders to try and align on the data stage. So not on standard alignment, but on the data we use from the audits or assessments. And we are making really good progress, have different discussions, different agreements with different standard holders. It was really great to see in Mathieu's results the level of preparedness for this kind of data sharing and sharing of audits. I've definitely seen, since I joined SLCP in 2019, I've seen a kind of improvement both in the preparedness of standard holders to be able to share data from a technical perspective, but also just the willingness to collaborate and more of a widespread, I guess, consensus across the industry that where we can collaborate and share data and add value to each other's work, then it makes sense to do that rather than to create duplication. So a few examples are listed here. I won't go into detail on all of them, but just to say we are making good progress and we'd like to expand the number of standard holders we're talking to as well. Just to touch very briefly on whether this is working, are we seeing any reduction in audit fatigue? These are some stats from our most recent signatory survey, which I'm having trouble displaying for some reason. And we asked our signatories, the brands and manufacturers, if they're able to use the CAF instead of their proprietary tools. And over 90% said they were being able to do that. I have some other stats on this slide that are not displaying properly. Let me see if I can read them out to you. Sorry, I can't get the stats, but over 70% of our signatory manufacturers said that their buyers are now accepting SLCP and that they had been asked to receive SLCP data from more than 6 buyers. And some of them said this had saved them up to 20 audits in a year. So this is significant savings for them in terms of time and resource. We also partner with the Better Buying Institute, and they include questions about audit harmonization and SLCP in particular in their annual survey. And they've just released the full report, and it's showed overall a 4% increase in the extent to which buyers are making efforts to reduce the audit fatigue on their suppliers. And in particular with SLCP, over a fifth of the respondents reported that their buyers were accepting SLCP. And many reported saving thousands of dollars a year thanks to this, sometimes up to as much as $20,000. And they self-reported how they are making use of these savings. And some of the examples of how they were being reinvested was in workplace improvements, new programs for workers, and sometimes directly impacting wages. So this is just initial evidence. We need to gather more, but it is promising to see the potential impact of programs such as SLCP. And I think this is nearly my last slide. I just wanted to end with an example from one manufacturer in particular. This is one of our signatories, Shahi Exports in India. They have rolled out SLCP across the majority of their factories. And they see now that over a third of their customers are accepting SLCP instead of running their own audits. And this has saved them, they calculated that since adopting SLCP, this has saved them nearly 4,500 hours of working time that they can then use for other activity. And we're always looking for these kind of qualitative examples that really bring SLCP to life and show how it's having an impact on individual facilities and individual manufacturers. I've really sped through that because I know we're very short on time, but I hope that was a short, helpful update on SLCP. We have loads of information available about the tool and about the program, both on our help desk and on our website. I can share the slides afterwards if that's helpful. I can also put some links in the chat, but please don't hesitate to get in touch if you'd like to know more. And Christian, I'll hand back to you.
Thank you very much, Holly. And yes, the slides will be shared. And yes, the session is recorded. Please feel free to ask questions via the chat box like you do already. Or if you want to ask questions, in this meeting, please just unmute yourself and ask the questions. With that having said, I now welcome Anne Patricia Sutanto from Pan Brothers, and I think it's my job to share the slides, right? Anne, 1 second. I use the.
Yeah, thanks everyone. Good morning, everyone in Europe, and good afternoon for those in Asia. Hi, Matthias. Hi, Holly. Hi, everyone who we are all aware of. Thank you for the opportunity. My slide is just 4 slides because, of course, Holly, Matteo, as well as Matthias later on will have more slides. So basically coming from the manufacturer side. Next slide.
Yep.
So this is, so the reason why I show you Pan Brothers, because I just want to share with you that we have about 22 factories across Java, and we actually deal with 4 compliance at this moment. Yeah, 4 compliance, better work, half of it. One is SLCP, and I'm actually also SLCP member. One is SCI-Side-Session, and the rest is actually, there's one textile. We have Hicks FSLM. So, but the reason why we have been able to reduce numbers of fatigue years for fatigue days or minutes or hours, because we have compliance team working together side by side with each of the factory. Next slide. So the elements of standards, of course, everyone knows that the profile, the recruitment, hiring, working hours, wages, benefits, worker treatment. I think Matthew already detailed out what are the elements of standard and buyer's code of conduct of SLCP, health and safety, terminations, health management system. And then, of course, we have our own code of conduct from the buyer side, like no child labor, no forced labor, no discrimination, gender equality, working hours, remunerations, no forced labor, disciplinary practices, freedom of associations, harassment, abuse, health and safety, as well as management safety. So basically the overall of the standard, since Pan Brothers actually have so many factories, we make sure that what the programs of the brands together with SCI-Side-Session, SLCP, Better Work, we try to make sure that the platform is being widened and holistic, so that every factory actually adhere to the more holistic standard, regardless the brands or buyers actually use which compliance or which audit. That's the way we approach this to actually reduce the number of audit fatigue. Next slide. Actually, this is the kind of thing that we usually overcome when buyers come to us, because we actually cater to most global brands. We have about 30 buyers within that 22 factories that we have. So first of all, actually, before we actually have the initiation with the buyer, we actually want to understand what is the buyer usually appoint, which audit, is it their own, or they can actually adapt to SCI-Side-Session or SLCP, or even the other audits. And then we actually open up to which standard, the external parties auditing standard. And then, of course, we try to liaise or actually make sure that the buyer can accept whatever standard that we already have in place for that particular factory. Of course, the solution is the buyers accept or flexible, or like Holly said, if they are part of SLCP, then we are just linked up with what SLCP has adhered to the platform of social compliance. And then, of course, we also, some of the buyers really have really higher standard compared to others. For example, one buyer sometimes cannot accept contract workers, even though the government allow, they also only accept permanent workers. And therefore, we have to actually adapt to the higher standard to make sure that we actually ensure that the audit actually being completed. Then, of course, this is maybe some of you know, some of you don't know. Our factory has been there since 1980, and we are part of a listed company, which is 1990 since back then. So therefore, in the last 4 years, we actually have comply also with the Indonesian government rule that we have to make sure that the sustainability report, all of them is actually included in the ESG of the company. So I know that not everyone is a big garment manufacturing, and therefore I also said to Christian earlier that look, I think the reason why we, the bigger part, actually part of SLCT, part of IAF, and that's why we believe in what Matthias and also ITMF has done with Matthew, is actually the SCI that actually can make more holistic and also more inclusive for everyone, not just the big garment or big textile industry, but also we can bring up the MSMEs in each of our country. I think that's basically my slides. And the last part is just thank you. And this is us, the Pen Brothers from Indonesia, as the largest garment here in Indonesia. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anne, for your slides. I think we quickly carry on and then maybe come back to the different speakers. If you are still around, Anne, otherwise I would ask you a question now. But if you bear with us, I think we carry on and ask now Caroline and Gerwin of Oeko-Tex and REP, respectively, to share their collaboration. Well, we're very curious to hear about it. Caroline, the floor is yours, and Gerwin.
Thank you, Christian. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Great. So hello, everybody, also from my side. My name is Caroline Banitzer, and I'm Stakeholder Manager at Oeko-Tex. And with me today is Gerwin Lepping. He is Europe represented at REP. You will hear him in a few minutes.
Good morning.
Good morning, Gerwin.
So at the beginning, many thanks to Christian and Matthias for having us and giving us the opportunity to talk about our cooperation between Oeko-Tex and REP, which is actually a collaboration for harmonization and alignment between standard organizations. So let's have a quick look at the agenda. So first of all, I would like to start with the question why cooperation is important to us. And then Gerwin will present REP, and I will go on with Oeko-Tex STEP, which is one of our standards and in focus here in this cooperation. And then we will talk about why we are cooperating and how the cooperation looks like. So let's directly start with the importance of cooperation. And of course, we are all aware of this standard jungle we are facing in the sector. And in order to bring industry forward and enhancing clarity and reducing discrepancies, what we can do is to identify interfaces and harmonize and align on that. And I think great is that when organizations share their different expertise, cooperation can bring us about learning from each other and improving the quality of our own standards. And when we try to avoid duplicative audits, meaning that we avoid asking the same question in audit interviews several times, we can, of course, reduce time and efforts. And of course, also reducing duplication at audits can give us the opportunity to specialize in audits and deepen certain topics we have expertise in. So now over to Gerwin for the basis of our cooperation.
Thank you very much, Caroline, and thank you very much, Matthias and Christian and everybody. Yeah, at the time we started talking a little bit deeper with Oeko-Tex. We as REP are, of course, one of the veteran standards in social compliance. And during the time we were talking with the National Action Plan in Germany and later on with the Green Button, we all realized that actually legislation, supply chain legislation, is becoming the new North Star. And we looked into it. Well, what can we do together? We are not specialists in environmental and product safety issues in the industry. We are fully focused on social compliance. What can we do together? How can we make each other better? And I think if we look at the common grounds, the good background is we are both certification programs. I strongly believe that certification will become more and more important going forward into legislation. It's simply a 0 or a 1. You are certified, yes or no. We have both this background. I think that's strong, both fully focused on textiles and apparel, We are both working worldwide. If we look at complementary forces, I think that's quite interesting. We are 23 years old nowadays as RAP. Oikotex is having a very long history in product testing and product safety, is having strong roots in Europe. We have strong roots in the US. We are mainly at tier 1, a little bit at tier 2. Oikotex is much deeper in tier 2. So if we look at this, we have perfect common grounds and complementary forces. If I may introduce quickly RAP, I think a lot of people do know us, so I do this very briefly. We are the largest independent factory-based certification program. Independent is we have no members, we have users, so we can act really independent. What we do, we are all around the globe. We are strong in Asia, we are strong in Latin America. We are objective, we are a non-profit team, and we say we are the global experts dedicated to promoting safe and lawful, humane and ethical manufacturing. For us, certification is very important, but also education and training. We do a lot of training around the world. This week we do it at Amphi at the University of Amsterdam, where we invite students and also people from companies. Educating and training is the basis of a good quality audit at the end of the day. And we are a program of choice of several industry associations, one to name the American Apparel and Footwear Association. Here quickly our 12 principles, and there we see indeed we have a point 10. The other ones are social compliance or custom compliance. That's also a benefit of RAP. But number 10 is not too comprehensive, and that's also very interesting for us to work with Oikotex on the environmental side as well. Next, please. Quick overview. We are headquartered in Arlington in the US. I'm based in Hamburg in Germany, in Europe. We have an own office in Bangladesh, in Hong Kong to cover China and the region. We have a full team in India. We have a full team in Southeast Asia, and we cover Latin America. So we are working worldwide. Just some numbers where you see where we have our certified factories. China is still #1, but if we look Vietnam, Bangladesh, India, Pakistan, Cambodia, Indonesia, but also Egypt, Sri Lanka, Mexico are within our top 10. Next. Here, a quick overview. We had last year 3,500 applications. Currently, over 3,300 facilities worldwide are certified by RAP. We are proud to cover over 3 million workers who benefit from our certification. And we have certified factories in more than 40 countries. As mentioned, mandatory human rights due diligence legislation is absolutely the new North Star. The legislation is already in place in Germany. The European Parliament will decide things in Brussels in May, we hope. Absolutely the new North Star. And how do we as RAP fit in? I think we are on the right track because we are independent non-profit. We provide third-party certification. We put a lot of emphasis on auditor training to keep the credibility and the quality high of what we do. We review all audit reports ourselves in Arlington. Notifications of corrective actions are initiated by RAP. And credibility is a key must. And also this is in our cooperation with Oikotex. We are absolutely, they are in the same league, and that's making pretty much sense if we have an eye on legislation. And what we do our own additional inspections by own RAP staff after a certification has been granted. Thank you very much, Caroline. I think that's a little bit my part of the story. Please continue.
Yes, thank you, Gavin. So let's make really an overview of who Oeko-Tex is, and especially on Oeko-Tex STEP. So first of all, Oeko-Tex is also a standard organization in the textile and leather industry, and we are made up of 17 independent textile and leather testing institutes located in Europe and Japan, and we are represented in over 100 countries so far, and working today with 21,000 businesses worldwide. And we understand ourselves as solution providers, and by that we developed different standards meeting the needs of actors, mainly manufacturers and brands along the supply chain. And our most known certification is our product certification standard 100, which ensures health and safety through the testing for harmful substances. And a similar one for leather products is the leather standard. And we identified that driving change already starts when thinking about the chemicals used in production. So we invented EcoPassport, which is an independent certification system for chemicals, colorants, and auxiliaries used in the textile and leather industry. And then the process control, we have Oeko-Tex STEP, which is a facility certification for transparent and sustainable textile and leather production. I will go more into detail on that on the next slides. And then we have Oeko-Tex Made in Green. It is the traceable product label for all kinds of textile and leather products that have been manufactured in environmentally friendly facilities and the socially responsible working conditions, and that the product has been made of materials tested for harmful substances. Beginning of November, we launched a new certification, which is Responsible Business, and this is a management tool to meet supply chain due diligence requirements in the textile and leather industry. So, but we want to have now a closer look at Oeko-Tex STEP. So this certification is a kind of sign of responsibility towards employees and the environment, and supports a custom company's journey towards sustainable production. And the mission is here really to ensure on one side long-term eco-friendly conditions and also socially responsible production conditions, as well as credibility and transparency through a simple communication of sustainability in production. And this certification consists of 6 different models covering topics including chemical management, environmental performance, health and safety, environmental management, quality management, and the social module, which refers to the ILO core labor standards and covers the wide range of issues such as prevention of child labor and discrimination, regulations of wages and benefits, and so on. And here we really realized that Oeko-Tex STEP, social module, and web have great similarities, and in questionnaires as well as in the assessment structure. So that's why we started talking to each other and talking about a cooperation. So the next question is why we're actually cooperating, and here I would like to have the focus on the benefits for our customers mainly. So first of all, of course, it's about using time and efforts for facilities in the certification process, which is mostly related to the audits conducted to, so reducing duplicative audits. And then it's also about sharing visibility and access to our communities. So supporting the facilities and making new contacts and finding new supplier cooperations. Last one, also giving customers choices for different assessments. So for example, when web customers choose to fulfill an environmental module of Oeko-Tex STEP. And how does this cooperation looks like? So first of all, our approach is to really find a path for cooperating and recognizing the programs to enhance the value of certifications. And this is done by recognizing a rep certification under the Oeko-Tex STEP program for the social module. And in return, rep promotes Oeko-Tex for product safety and environmental certification with web certified facilities. And when we have a look at the status, so as Gervin also mentioned, we started with a comparison of our questionnaire, of our certification system, and we really got into detail on each individual part. And last year, we both developed and signed an MOU describing our approach and the steps to take in this collaboration. And then we also initiated a pilot program, and here we are at the moment. So it's about identifying facilities that have both certifications. So to develop a combined audit approach for the pilot with incentives and a plan of auditors representing both programs to work together on a combined audit. And then, of course, it's also about assessing outcomes of this combined audit and considering a combined audit protocol, including, for example, the pricing or scheduling and so on. And the end, also assessing merits of working together, such as including audit cost savings or reduced fees for customers when applying for the other certification. Yeah, that's it. A rough overview on our collaboration. So there's still a path, but I think we are on a good way. So thank you for listening, and great thanks again for inviting us and sharing our ideas and collaboration. So
also thank you from my side, and hope to see you all Thursday or Friday in Paris live. And if there are any questions, please circle back to us. Thank you very much.
Yes.
Thank you, Caroline. Thank you, Gervin. Well, time is flying terribly fast today. Questions really have to be asked either in Paris or by email through either direct emails or through ITMF. I quickly now pass on to Matthijs to deliver his presentation. Matthijs.
Right. Hello, Christian. Hello, everybody. I hope everybody can hear me.
Yes.
That's good. Let me start this presentation. I hope everybody can see this.
Yes.
I will be very brief, as some of you probably need to go on to another meeting or another webinar. I just wanted to wrap up with what we are actually planning to do as SCI, IF, and ITMF, and often ITC together. And before I say that, first of all, I would like to very much thank the previous speakers, because this is, as you will see already, how we are working together. But I would like to remind everybody that this is always a parallel two-step process. So we want brands, retailers, and standards to converge on how they collect and verify the data, which is the audit fatigue part, and to converge on how they analyze, score, remediate, which is the actual standard fatigue part. And we could already see in the presentation by Oecotex and Rep that often one thing leads to another, and the collaboration on audits is also looking to go towards a collaboration on the standards, and see how there can be a convergence on that. So what do we want to do in the next year? Partly, what are we doing already? SCI is having a structured series of talks with standard holders based on the outcomes of the annual ITC report. So on the one hand, we see positive developments, but at some places we will talk with the standard holders and say, okay, you can improve a little bit there on your ability to converge. And if you are already have that ability to converge, you should be doing it. And why is this not happening? So this is something that is like an active nudging on behalf of the companies that suffer from audit and standard fatigue. The other part, and I've seen it come back in questions, which is very important, getting those large brands and retailers or medium-sized brands and retailers, because as Anne correctly pointed out, this is about everybody. It's not just about big companies, it's also about the small, medium-sized brands and also manufacturers. But what is really important is that those brands and retailers drop their proprietary codes in favor of third-party standards. Or when they keep them, they also commit to more convergence. And here the collaboration with another big initiative in which IF and ITMF are involved, the Sustainable Terms of Trade initiative, which is about purchasing practices, which is about the correct way for buyers to deal with their supply chains. This is a very important part that we will be bringing up to create some additional force on brands and retailers to do that. Then what we are already doing, but we want to be doing more, is to disseminate among our members, all of those industry associations and individual manufacturers, the importance of participating in already existing global solutions. SLCP is an example there. So we really work quite closely together to bring that message to our members. And then finally, what I believe is that we'll see in the coming months is that good things are happening, but they must accelerate. We must move faster together. And accelerating means perhaps building new global projects where we can work together with more standard holders and brands and retailers to especially focus on that standard fatigue issue, for which there is not really yet on a global level a collaborative effort going on. So those, I think, are four elements of how the SCI, IF, ITMF, and ITC will be working together. And now I pass back to Christian.
Thank you, Matthijs. Thank you, everyone. I think we are over the time, but I would like to give the floor to Anne. She's representative of the manufacturing side today, and I'm just curious to hear from Anne if you're still with us.
Yes, Christian, I'm with you.
Yes, after you have heard. I know, that's okay.
Yeah.
After you have heard what has happened on the audit and on the standard fatigue side today, do you think that this is encouraging for you, or where there needs to be more efforts to reduce the burden of standard and audit fatigue on the manufacturers?
Okay, so first of all, thank you everyone for having this call, especially ITMF and IIF. And like what has been mentioned by Matteo as well as Matthias, our objective is actually to converge and collaborate. And for those who have so many factories, how we actually can ensure that we have one standard, which is the social labor compliance program. But like what Okotex and RAP has mentioned, we have the environment side, not just about the product safety and environment. And everyone knows that there would be additional one, which is called carbon footprint. So right now, it is a force that we need the convergence, so that the burdens of the supply chain on the production side, it's lessened, because we have another challenge, which is to actually calculate our own emissions within scope 1, scope 2, scope 3 of our business process, right? So I really hope that we are moving forward with this convergence and collaborations among the social labor program, so that we actually can think further how we actually accommodate the carbon footprint, especially when we are planning to supply to G7 countries. That's what everyone has in mind, right? To supply to G7 countries. I think that's from my part, yeah, not just for the big industries, but especially I don't even understand how the MSMEs actually can handle the carbon footprint if we could not make decisions on how to actually overcome the social labor compliance. And then that's from my part.
Thank you very much,
Christian.
Anne. Thank you. Well, I think we have to leave it here for the time being. I would like to thank everyone for having participated, presenters for having shared their perspective on standard fatigue, but also in connection with that audit fatigue. And we hope to see you on different occasions. We will continue to increase our efforts to increase awareness about standard fatigue, but also to bring people in this sense, organizations and companies together, as Matthijs has very nicely pointed out in his presentations. And of course, next year we will have an update on the results of preparedness for convergence, and we hope to see more examples of cooperation between standards and maybe also brands on standard convergence. With that, thank you very much, everyone, and you're going to receive both access to the recording and also the presentations on the SCI website, standardconvergenceinitiative.org. Thank you so much and have a wonderful day and see you soon.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you,
Thanks, Christian, Matthijs.
Thank you, Christian.
Thank you so
Bye-bye.
much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.